Hey, it's News from Heaven. Welcome, everybody. Today we're talking about how divine truths have literal power over hell. You know, you'll be at a party, you're with your friends, people are drinking beers, and someone says, man, divine truths have power over hell. And everybody says, yeah, they kind of do in like a metaphorical way. I can see it could like lift up your heart. It's something to... No, man, it's literal. I put that word in the title because we have here an opportunity to expand what we think of when we hear the word truth. Why is divine truth such a big deal? Is it just like concepts, a series of arguments, or a description of how things are? And how does that interact with hell? And you might say, hell is not something that I really need much help dealing with, but the hell that Swedenborg describes is, you could put it in another way, everything that messes with your life. So we've got a situation here, which is that in our minds, we have what seems to be for us and what seems to be against us, right? And the stuff that's for us, the love and the truth and the wisdom and everything like that, everything that's uplifting and sort of cheering us on in our story versus dragging us down, is heaven. Whereas everything that is trying to deceive us and entice us into the wrong life path and trying to grind us into nothing and make us miserable and all that, that's hell. That is a collective emanation from evil, which personified is what Swedenborg calls hell. So if we're finding out about divine truth having power over hell, sure, that can sound like some religious, science project. But if we're talking about how does this stuff actually change our mental experience day to day, then that's something. What we're going to be doing is looking in True Christianity 224. Download this for free. Follow along. Read the before and after. Get more context. And here we're talking about how the word has indescribable power. Nowadays, scarcely anyone knows that there is any power in truths. If you're a superhero, hey, what's your power? Truths. Oh, Mom, I don't want the toy of that superhero. What are we talking about, power in truths? And how is it that the word, and maybe we dig a little more into what that is, has indescribable power? Often when Swedenborg is talking about the word, he's talking about the Bible or a body of teaching. It's fine, but it can maybe like make you feel good. It can maybe be a little bit inspiring, but it doesn't have indescribable power. I mean, that's not like, there it is, it's absolutely changing the dynamic of everything. What are we talking about? People think that the truth is just something spoken by someone in authority, so it needs to be done. Okay? They think the truth is only like a breath from someone's mouth and a sound in someone's ear. Of course. If I'm going to deliver the truth to you, I'm telling you something that's like a little factoid. Isn't that what the truth is? Actually, truth and goodness are the origin of all things in both worlds. Both worlds being the physical world where we are here, and then the spiritual world above that. Forget I ever drew this. The spiritual and the physical. Isn't it helpful? You got me, Curtis, walking you through Swedenborg and doing helpful things like absolutely describing what he's about to tell you right there. I am indispensable. Do not cut out the middleman and read this stuff for yourself. Truth and goodness are the means by which the universe was created and by which it is preserved. And this is something that we've got to get into our understanding fabric, what it is that we perceive the world through, because Swedenborg goes on and on about truth and goodness. If you're really saying that Swedenborg had this amazing full spectrum insight into life, this is what Swedenborg is saying, that we all, listen, those of us who are in the world today, let's put us down here, man. Okay, don't worry, there's a plan. Those of us who are in the world today, let's say, the stuff we've been able to discover through the scientific method, through collective will and all. It's just amazing. It goes so deep. Like, we understand so much of how little, like, atoms and things, that's an atom, by the way, and other things and string theories, and we understand so much about life, and any one of us understand a particular slice of life really well. Why I am sitting here hanging around Swedenborg, who was doing his recording hundreds of years ago, when just about everything they knew scientifically is now obsolete. A lot of the cultural norms that they have, we now look at and say that's not okay. But what I assert he had was this full spectrum view of life, because common wisdom, or sort of the collective, what we all agree on is true, doesn't include all this other stuff, like the nature of God, a nature of heaven or afterlife, all the world of spirits, and the model of the mind he gives. There's all this extra stuff that we've got here that is absolutely essential to filling out and making this square with what we all go through on a day-to-day basis. So what Swedenborg offers is this full spectrum view of life that he didn't see, I don't think, the details, for sure, in the way, in this certain slice that we can see it now, but he saw the whole picture more than any other single source, or maybe even collective sources, that I've ever come across anyway. So that's why we're sitting here reading this book. And when Swedenborg got this full spectrum picture of life, you cannot pick up a book of his without soon running into goodness and truth. That these are what God is, goodness and truth. This is of utmost importance. Whenever we're trying to learn anything that's going to peel back the curtain and lead us into this mindset that is more effective to navigate the strangeness of life and to try to get our feet underneath us in participating in consciousness and in trying to organize things, and goodness and truth. The key is goodness and truth. So that stuff must be cooler than it sounds. Well, goodness and truth, those are maybe something it's a little bit peripheral, or maybe good Hallmark card. What goodness and truth is actually the source of everything. So we got to start thinking of them not just as feelings and thoughts, but substance itself. And this could perhaps lead us to, how can these divine truths have power over hell? Okay. Truth and goodness are the means by which the universe was created and by which it is preserved. So everything in the universe brought to you courtesy of and maintained courtesy of goodness and truth. They are the means by which people were created. Your origin story, goodness and truth. The two of them are everything to all things. That if you could separate out and peer in with some kind of existential microscope that could see the true nature of everything, goodness and truth are in every single thing, everywhere. That's why they're a little bit relevant to us. And here they can help us make sense of some famous but mystical sounding passages in the Bible. The Gospel of John openly states that the universe was created by divine truth. In the beginning was the Word. I'm talking about the Word has indescribable power. And the Word was God. All things were made by it. The world was made by it. Okay. Well, there we have that stated pretty plainly. You can't say that Swedenborg's over here and the Bible's over there. That sounds like divine truth had some kind of role in the creation of things. David says, the heavens were made by the word of Jehovah. In each of these passages, the word means divine truth. Okay. Since the universe was created by divine truth, the universe is also preserved by divine truth, since preservation is an ongoing creation, just as continuing to exist is the same as perpetually coming into being. We human beings, I just paused there. You thought I was going to maybe make commentary? Well, I'm not making any commentary. I'm just pausing. We human beings were made by divine truth because all aspects of us relate to intellect and will. All right. We're starting to get to a because. So how do we take, admittedly, when I hear divine truth, I can't picture divine truth like I can even picture atoms, or like, just even though I've never seen an actual atom, I've seen diagrams of them, or a bush, or a backhoe, or a traffic cone. Oh yeah, I'm just looking out the window and naming what I see. it's harder for me to picture divine truth. So when you say to me, you're made by divine truth, and this is supposed to be something that can equip you to live in a certain way that's effective, I need to know how that fits. So give me some more structure to my mental concept of that. And I think we're starting to try to poke around in that, because all aspects of us relate to intellect and to will. Our intellect is a vessel for divine truth, just as our will is a vessel for divine goodness. You remember before, I was going on and on. I was actually worked up into a pretty big frenzy around goodness and truth. Around goodness and truth, wasn't I? Go back and see, I was a raving madman for goodness and truth. And I said, you can find goodness and truth in anything. And so what about in us? How do you break us down and find goodness and truth in us? We have these two things. We often symbolize them by the head and the heart. Swedenborg says the core of what makes us us is an intellect and a will. That this is, and even goes beyond just thinking and feeling. This is the essence of what your spirit is. That your humanness, the form that you have, is an extension of those things, rather than those things being an emergent property from the way your human form is structured. So, these two things in us, why break it down into two things? Because there's two essentials of life, goodness and truth, and there's these parts in us that the two core parts of us are these receptors, the intellect, the receptor of divine truth, the will, the receptor of divine goodness. And that is why we can exist, is because we have the means by which to receive the core of existence. Okay, that sounds good. Therefore, the human mind, consisting as it does of these two primary faculties, is nothing less than a form of divine truth and divine goodness, organized both spiritually and physically. Doesn't sound so bad. I mean, that's a little pride of ownership there. The human, okay, let's get really concrete, really fast. The human cerebrum is that form. Since everything in human beings depends on their minds, all the things that constitute their bodies are just appendages that are activated and brought to life by these two primary faculties. So you can even break it down, and he does in much more detail in other places, as to which parts of the brain are the intellect part and which parts are the will. He talks about the voluntary and the involuntary. He talks about the different hemispheres. That this, if we know where to look, you can very distinctly see that there's two receiving sides to us that are working in harmony. I think that's cool. And remember, anatomy was like key to Swedenborg's groundwork. Like, he spent a lot of his time learning anatomy and said that you really can't understand how spiritual reality is or the universe unless you get the human body, because it all relates back to the human body, because the human body is an instance of the sort of ultimate receptor of divine goodness and truth. These points make it clear why God came into the world as the Word and became a human being. Can I talk to you about Jesus? Jesus has got power over hell. Jesus walks around, casts out demons, heals people. According to Swedenborg, he even, in addition to his earthly adventures, went down and organized and conquered everything in hell that is trying to destroy the human race. So what relation is he to the Word? He did so to redeem humankind. Came into the world as the Word and became a human being. God took on all power through a human manifestation that was divine truth. So how do you manifest divine truth? A human manifestation can be divine truth. If you thought, how would truth be manifested? It would be a book, right? It would be a PDF. It's got to be information. How could a human being be the manifestation of divine truth? So the form that we're in there is somehow in the form that he was in a perfect instance, or the primary instance. That is what divine truth is like. Now it's starting to be living, because if you think of words on a page, they can affect your mind and heart, but a person can go do things. He took the hells that had risen all the way up to the heavens, where the angels were, and threw them down, brought them under control, and forced them to obey him. This was not done by a verbal word. It was done by the divine word, which is divine truth. Swedenborg talks about clashes between truth and falsity in the spiritual world. This hell always uses as its mode of attack falsity, and heaven in its mode of defense. By the way, heaven never attacks hell, because heaven loves everyone who's in hell. Heaven loves everyone, but will defend what's good and true. And people who are being attacked by hell, they always defend using truth. So there's clashes between falsity and truth on this grand scale in the spiritual world. And you might think of that as some kind of debate, like it's truth against falsity, right? Isn't it some kind of verbal jousting? And Swedenborg said it's not like that at all. Because the spiritual world is organized around things of truth and goodness, that's actually like a real clash of substances. And here he's making this fascinating distinction that this isn't done by the Lord saying something or educating. This is the divine word, which is divine truth. And divine truth being a thing that can do things. And all I'm trying to do in this episode, I don't know if it's fair to say I'm trying to do something in any episode. I'm just going through the text with you and seeing what it brings in each moment. But I think what we're trying to do, if you'll go on this journey with me, is that we're trying to open up our minds. All you can do is create a vessel in your mind. Open up the concept that, okay, truth is something more than just verbal ideas. And then heaven, if it's really out there as described, can fill that in. You know when you get insight, when you feel like you sort of have a concept, but then it clicks and you feel like, oh, that's what that means. We're trying to get this sense of, oh, the divine truth is something that can do something. And we'll let that God fill that in as necessary in our lives at whatever point. Then he opened, this is back to what Jesus was up to. Then he opened a great chasm between the hells and the heavens so that no one from hell could cross. If any of them try at the first step, they feel tortured like a snake thrown on a sheet of red-hot iron. Don't do that to snakes, by the way. They're just living their lives. I know, it's just a metaphor, but still, don't do it. Or on a swarm of ants. As soon as the devils and Satans catch a whiff of divine truth, they immediately dive headlong into the depths, hurl themselves into caves, and seal them up so completely that not a crack is left open. Which is interesting, too, because what Swedenborg calls devils and Satans, a devil is any of us if we devote our lives to primarily to destructive pleasures, meaning we enjoy and pursue something that we know harms other people. That's a devil. That's what it is to be the devil. And a Satan is when we devote ourselves, and this is again all truncated, but we devote ourselves to using principles to get what we want that we know are false and harmful. Right? So when you devote your life to that, right, that creates, this condition that we call being devil or Satan. And interesting that in the spiritual world, right, where you really embody your deepest motives. So all of hell is made up of these people who are choosing to go after that stuff and love it. They can't even tolerate the presence in a 1 part per million of divine truth. So it's not just like an argument. It is something that affects the matrix that they can live in. And the whole point of it is not to attack them. It's to keep them from coming in and pursuing the destructive loves and the destructive falsities that each of those rely on and have as their end goal, messing with anybody they come across, you or me, and makes actually life worse for the people who are pursuing those things, because the more you get what you want when your desire is destructive, the more it destroys you as well, because it destroys the form in you of goodness and truth, which we were just talking about. And the more you destroy that, the more you destroy your own humanity. The reason is that their wills have evil desires. Why is this so potent to them? And their intellects have false beliefs. They therefore have the opposite of divine goodness and divine truth. Because, as I say, everything in human beings depends on these two primary structures of life. And divine truths affect devils and Satans profoundly and violently from head to toe. It's not just verbal. This, if you have your receptor backwards, that stuff, like a substance, like the wrong thing put into your cells, causes this kind of tangible clash. You can see from this that the power of divine truth is indescribable, since the word that the Christian church has is a 3-leveled container for divine truth. is obvious that this word is what is meant in John. And let's see I'll read the rest of this, but it's just interesting that, okay, we've gone way out into the world, into the stratosphere to say, look, goodness and truth are they're not really words, they're like the essence of things, and it's all crazy, and there's substance and form and all that. But yet Swedenborg is advocating here that the thing, the Bible in this case, the word is an expansive concept that obviously can be embodied in the person of Jesus, that Swedenborg says other cultures have had in all different forms, that actually nature was the original carrier for the word when we understood it correctly. Somehow, though, you can take this goodness and truth that are the essence and underlying form of everything that cause these real effects spiritually, but it is somehow contained back in this verbal or textual thing of the Bible. So one takeaway is that we can get that very real power somehow. Obviously, it's not as simple as cracking the book open, because you can do that and feel like you get nothing out of it, and you can have people cracking the Bible open and bringing out things that are destructive. But there is real value and power. And this is one of Swedenborg's great quests, was to try to show this is really something that its true power hasn't even been unlocked. The power of the word is indescribable. I can support this point with many pieces of evidence I have experienced in the spiritual world, but since these would stagger belief, like if you're with me for the rest of this stuff, you wouldn't believe this, I will forgo any listing of them here. You can see some of them mentioned in 209 above. You can go download the book, check that out. On the basis of the points I've just made, I will, however, make this assertion. A church that has divine truths from the Lord has power over the hells. A church that has divine truths from the Lord has power over the hells. And what is a true form of the church as a unit? The church is us. Swedenborg says the church is something that's alive in here, in you, right? In your heart and in your mind. That's the unit of the church. It's when you are taking the love and truth that are coming out and living by them. We can gather and form organizations that are working to be that truth, but really, this is the unit of it. So if Swedenborg is saying a church that has divine truths from the Lord has power over the hells, that is the point of us going in and trying to learn the truth and bring it alive. Because once we have divine truths in our little churches, or our little church in us and its two parts, that's when the Lord can gain access, and with his divine truth, cordon off, make us safe from the hell that comes after us. The whole point of everything that we're doing here is to build that church, some kind of framework of lived principles that eventually get it to where they can actually, and really that's where you're going to see the impact of it. And when I've felt like this is something that's really working for me, it's never been like, oh, I've learned this Swedenborg principle and now I can go like this and this tree falls over in the physical world. It's always been when I really feel like there's power here is when there were negative thoughts, there were ways of being that I felt like I could just never get away from and were continually eating at me. But then when I had these certain principles work for me, I saw that stuff evaporate. In the spiritual world, in my mind and heart, there's these mountains being moved. That is the power. This is the church that the Lord was talking about when he said to Peter, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. The Lord said these words after Peter proclaimed that Christ was the Son of the living God. The rock in this passage means the very truth. In fact, everywhere in the word, a rock means the Lord's divine truth. Can we get that rock working for us here to push back everything that's keeping us from the life of heaven? Because when you get into the life of heaven, not only are you happier, and I feel like I've seen it in little spurts, it's very hard to have it last because we're continually improving, but I do know that you're happier, you're more productive, you're kinder to the people around you. It lets a little bit of that love and truth into the world. And the more each of us are building that individual truth, or church from truth, for Freudian slip, the church is truth, then the more we can affect the world in good ways. And don't we know, as we're facing this pandemic right now, that's why I'm doing this show from home with all this construction noise out here, and don't we want to have everybody working together against evil and falsity, which is like the disease that's coming at us, trying to mess us up. So build that little church in you. Go out and feel the power of divine truth. All right, thanks so much. Talk to you soon.